We're learning more about how a family of 4 died in their Harrow home 2.5 weeks ago. Carly Walsh and her 2 children, Madison and Hunter Walsh, were shot and killed. It is suspected that Stephen Walsh shot them and then turned the gun on himself. A murder-suicide. Well, it isn't clear what events led to that fatal event. Police say this case is one of intimate partner violence, and that has some people who knew Carly Walsh confused. This raises questions about what constitutes as intimate partner violence. For more on this information, we're joined by 2 guests in our studio. Heather Johnson-Dobrotsky is the Director of Operations with Hiatus House. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Lady Lafayette is from the Welcome Center for Women and Children in Windsor, and she's also in our studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Heather, I want to start with you. With people think of intimate partner violence, we assume there's a history of ongoing abuse in that relationship. Is that how we should still define intimate partner violence?
Yes, typically there is a history of abuse in the relationship, but it's not always the case. And normally abuse starts off, kind of in subtle ways, passive ways. It often looks like emotional abuse, verbal abuse, put downs, name calling. Violence itself is, it's a form of power and control. So the perpetrator is trying to gain power and control over the victim. So it could be physical violence. That's what typically people think of when they hear the word violence. However, again, like I said, it can be emotional, psychological, manipulation, tactics just to control somebody.
And lady, what came top of mind to you when you heard this was intimate partner violence?
I think more the devastation of how many our community has seen over the past 2 years and that we're still at this place. And then devastating for me because it was a conversation I had to have with my daughter, who was the friend of a friend of Madison.
Go ahead.
I think it was starting a lot of conversations in the community that are important for parents to be having with their children.
Have you had people reach out to you since this case?
We've seen a small amount of calls regarding it, mostly asking for ways to support. So I think that when people in the community start having the conversation, we want action and people want to be helpful. They want to be involved. They want to know what to do. So we've been really rooting people back to supporting the agencies that are supporting survivors in the community and just starting the conversation and supporting agencies like Hiatus House and groups like the Violence Against Women Working Committee.
Is there always a sense of a history of abuse, or is this a chance where there was a mental health issue and then there was a sort of a break in that mental health?
So when there's a mental health issue, there is, there could be an escalation of violence. It could be one of the factors where, you would determine whether that's a high-risk case or not. However, mental health, is separate. It's a separate issue altogether. And a lot of people say, someone had a mental health issue and this is why they acted the way they did. Most people with mental health issues do not act out in violent ways.
Okay. Because I think when I spoke with some people who knew Carly, they did know there was sort of a history of some mental health concerns when it came to Stephen, but they never worried about her safety. Doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't there. Would it be maybe they missed signs?
Yeah, possibly, right? And like I said, it could be subtle. It could also be, Carly was minimizing. That is something that we see with women who have experienced trauma and violence, is they do minimize the situation. And just because someone's violent towards you doesn't mean you don't love and care for them. This is a woman who built a life with her partner and had children. So, often women who have experienced violence hold on to the hope that things will get better, that their partner will get the help that they need and that things will be okay.
What can we learn from this lady?
Well, I think it's an opportunity, again, to look at things like, in Ontario, we do have a 10-year plan to end gender-based violence against women and start looking at things like ways we support women through the legal system. Look how it intersects with housing and people's ability to transition out of situations like this, and really look at the conversations that we have that are preventative, which is a great part of that national plan we have, is having conversations about the root bias. A lot of this is bias against women, and doing a lot of the work even within schools around consent and boundaries and starting those conversations early so that we're insulating, preparing a better community that's safer overall.
I'm also thinking of the people who reach out and say, what can I do? Is it also understanding that there's ways to see the signs in other people, and that's a way to make sense of this?
I would say Heather is probably the expert at answering for those.
Yeah. So, like I said, you don't always see the signs, but there are some typical signs that, we would say, hey, do you see this? So, one of them is isolation. So, if you have someone who typically would show up to family functions, call once a week, and you've noticed that that's not happening anymore, if you've seen like just a general sadness or kind of a depression, and that's not typical for somebody. What else is there? If you've just their mental health, their physical health has changed. They're making excuses for their partner. You might say, hey, that wasn't very nice what he said to you, but they may, make excuses and try to minimize and deny what's happening.
You hear that a lot. You think, "Oh, no, well, they have a stressful job," or it's just a phase. There's a lot going on right now. It's going to get better." If you're in one of those relationships and you find you're saying that over and over again, and you really believe there's not any risk, where do you go to find out what's normal?
Hmm.
I'm using quotation marks,
Yeah.
and what's abnormal?
Yeah. So that is a lot of the manipulation, right? This person has been led to believe, their partner tells them over and over again, oh, like you said, oh, I just lost my job, or, I'm going through a lot of stress, so they want to believe it as well. But, if you are questioning, we offer a 24-hour anonymous crisis line. You can call in anonymously. You can just run a situation scenario by us, and we can explain what the red flags are and, the resources in our community to get help.
How should people get involved in those conversations? I'm thinking if I have a good close friend and they're showing signs that you've mentioned, what's the first way to have that conversation? Because I think what we're trying to do is break that stigma of what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors.
Definitely. And I know that a lot of people are hesitant. There are these beliefs that, if I say something, maybe I'm going to make the situation worse, or maybe I'm going to push that person away. But the reality is you can't make the situation any worse than what it is. So just showing a general concern and care for that person, asking questions, if they start to back off, say, you know what, that's okay. But just know that I'm here to support you when you're ready.
Do you have people come through your door, lady, who say, I wish someone would have asked more. I wish someone would have stepped in?
I think we're hearing that, historically over time, once women get to have that sort of sense of relief of having access to service like Heidi's House or the Welcome Center, hindsight's always going to be 2020, I think, in those situations. But generally, yeah, for a lot of the women going with, like Heather said, just a general, if you see it, name it, have those conversations, start them out. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, like all the courage that's gotten us this far is from the survivors and it's from the agencies that are supporting them that's gotten us this far. And so we need to keep supporting survivors and the agencies that are supporting them.
And you had mentioned earlier, but we've been covering this morning, the 10-year plan to eradicate gender-based violence. How much of a goal is that? Is that an obtainable goal?
Well, I think it's a really action-based plan, actually, and some of the parts that I had really enjoyed of it was that focus of moving towards prevention as opposed to aftercare. So let's start getting at some root cause and let's start preventing some of the system access and some of the breakdowns before they even occur. And I know for someone who runs a shelter, that's something that, prevention is something that is key to us, both keeping our numbers down, but keeping the doors open to make sure that we're only accessed by those who really, really need us the most. So it's an ambitious plan. It's less than 10 years in, but there's been over $1 billion put into the plan. And this is the first plan that has listened, I think, closely to survivors and frontline agencies when creating the plan. But yeah, it's ambitious to think about something that is so pervasive, more pervasive than most modern issues, us making a big dent in it.
Yeah, what does eradication mean? How would that even look?
Heather, what would it look like if we eradicated? Because I think for me, I wouldn't have a lot of people.
No, we wouldn't. Well, when we talk about, especially, when we're talking about what a healthy relationship looks like, that's what it'd be, right? It would be loving relationships where people didn't fear for their lives. They felt good about themselves. A lot of women in abusive relationships lose their self-confidence, their self-esteem. They feel worthless. So just lifting people up and, supporting people and having those healthy relationships. And like Lady said, people do reach out to us for support and assistance, but we also know that only 20% of women actually reach out for any type of formal assistance. So it's family and friends that are, probably going to be the first people who, actually see what's going on. So that is a crucial moment to step in and say and do something.
What do you want? What do you want people to hear as we wrap up? What did you want to make sure people heard when you came in this morning?
I think continuing the conversation going and knowing that saying the names for Carly and Hunter and Madison, and I think the 5 to 6 women we've lost to femicide in the past 2 years is really keeping the focus on survivors and keeping the focus moving ahead on the action work that needs to be done.
And for me, I mean, we have a lot of women who call in and, they're questioning whether, it is domestic violence. It's only just emotional abuse, psychological abuse, manipulation. However, always know that it could escalate, right? So always have a safety plan. And that could, include involving an agency like Hide House or the Welcome Center to create one. Otherwise, there are really great safety plans online as well. So just having an idea of what to do if there was a threat to your life.
All right. Thank you so much.